Hello, good afternoon. Welcome to the class.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, madam.
Good afternoon, ma'am.
Yeah, today I'll be rushing the class for the whole topics. I'll be taking you through the textbook from the beginning to the ending. So, what is this English in India is saying? You have completely five blocks. So just the phases, what happened in the before pre-transportation, after transportation, before independence, after independence. What was the situation? What was the scenario? How English was introduced? After English introduced, what was the situations? And what is now the current scenario? I'll just be taking you through all these topics. You just have to concentrate on and listen because this is your last class, but you just need to understand so that you can elaborate all your answers while you're writing your examination. So for the first you have to understand what is your book. So you have all these things. This is an course that how English was an given the awareness, and how with what motives English was introduced in India, and how the course the English was introduced, and over the years how it was evolved, and how it has become the lingua franca. What is this lingua franca? Is a link language. So how this has become the lingua franca when there was no English in the in our Indian subcontinent, then the English has evolved. Then it is just not only evolved, but it has become the lingua franca of the nation. It has become the link language and the bridge language of our subcontinent, and how the struggle for the independence, um, and after the independence, what was the position of the English, the use of English for various purpose after independence, and knowledge of English becoming an advantage for Indians in also in the globalization era. So that's why I have covered all the important and the easy topics before, and I'm discussing the kind of a toughest topics in the end of the end of the year classes. So when you will understand what happened in the transportation phase, in the transportation phase, English was mostly used in the political domain. We already discussed how the European emperors and the power struggle, everything has finished. So after all these things, English was how English was used. English was used only in the political domain, and how the political domain English is there. It is like formal English. It is very a typical kind of English. It is kind of, if you wanted to say a small thing like I'm thirsty, they took it in such a way that they exaggerate it. They have made the things complicated. Like the English was so complicated, so formal at that time. At which time? At the political domain time. And when was this political domain time? That the transportation phase. So how was we are talking anything, any topic we'll talk, and that is related to English. So when the political domain, what was the political domain here? The British was ruling. We also have our Indian rulers. The Indian rulers and the British rulers were used to communicate with each other. When the communication is done, mostly in the political domain. So English in our education institutions is an another. It's you can tell it as before and after Christ, something like that is there. No, so you can tell English in an education institutions is an heroic event in the history. That is a dominant. The dominant act which took place, bringing English into our education system, because that has changed our that has changed the face of India. So it can indeed be a historical, you can call it as an historical phenomena. About what? About not getting British in India. It is about the language. English language coming to India is a historical phenomena, you can say it. So there is a critic named called Anand Swami, who was a well-known critic. He says that, he said a word called, one of the most remarkable features of the British rule in India has been the fact that the greatest injuries done to the people of India have taken the outward form of blessing of this education, that is English education, is a striking example. So what he's saying, a person called Anand K Kumaraswamy, he is a well-known critic in those time. So he is writing in his critics that, yeah, we had British rule, we suffered, Indians have suffered a lot under the British governance, but it is again a blessing. We suffered, okay, but it is again a blessing. Why? Because of the English language. If Britishers are not coming, if European countries are not coming, English is, there is no English language in India. When there is no English language, when we will be somewhere down in the, in economic wise, in political wise, in any other wise, if you take Indian subcontinent, that will be somewhere under the poorest country, because there is with the English there is liberty and freedom. People like these kind of great scholars have written that when you know English, you'll be educated. When you are educated, you know what is liberty and you know what is freedom. When you know what is liberty and when you know what is freedom, you will stick to your boundaries. So what he is trying to say is, here British has no, British has ruled us and we have done our struggle, but there is something good happened. It is kind of a blessing that education has came into the country, and now we are thriving, and we, India is also has his name in all the top other countries. So that was his statement. Just you have to remember that. And then one can add along with education in any other things like the English language. If you take it, railways, printing press, a telegraph, etc. So in the 19th century, which is the aligned tongue called English tongue, became the language of Indian government also. And why? When you don't want British, but still our Indian, for example, if I have to stop you there, do we have a government before British? No. We have many Indian rulers who were ruling India. Not one ruler was ruling India. We have many rulers in north, south, and areas like that. We are never a united country, because every king has their own land, and every king is ruling their own lands, and India is kind of a separated kind of thing. If you see it before British came into, and English is the language that made us unity. And why, I will tell you in the before coming period. But you have to understand here the history. If you take the history of India, India was never a united country. Because why it was never a united country? Yeah, we do have a diversified heritage of our India. We are very proud of our Indian cultures and languages and everything, but there India was never united, because all other rulers like Muslim rulers, Aryan rulers, they conquered to some extent of place, and everybody has their own place for ruling. When this British has come to our land, they were the supremacy. Because they have political power, military power, and every power, British, all the Indian rulers has to work under the British. When British has took over our Indian subcontinent, then they are when they were put their feet into our land, they started trading, doing business. They found it good, and they wanted to expand, explore, and scattered all over the Indian rulers, whoever there, they were making friends with the Indian rulers, and the communication was going on. The most default here they were facing, the barrier they were facing was the language. So they wanted to get English language, because communication was getting difficult, and they are spreading their wings. So they wanted to bring English into our mm, Indian subcontinent. That is how the graph goes there. So how was the English? How is English now? It is completely different English, what are we are talking. But when you're comparing it to in the times of transportation phase, at that time the English was difficult. How was the English? they it was not a common language there. They used language only for the political domain purpose. And how the domain political domain purpose English will sound. It sounds very ostentatious formality. And what is this formality? It is very exaggerating, and it is very kind of storytelling. If you want to say a simple thing, it is kind of exaggeration. Are you getting me? Am I audible to everyone?
Yes, madam.
Yeah, one second, huh? Yeah, hello. The screen is visible, right?
Yes, it's
Yeah.
visible.
Yeah, yes. So, how was the formality? It was exaggerated. It is kind of complicated. So, the writings, whatever the conventions writings before they did was in Persian, highly influenced by Persian convention. So, Persian and this kind of ostentatious English together, they used to use in the political domain field. This style was marked in those period, like it was called as lordship register. So whenever this kind of literature you see, the writings you see, that was called as a lordship literature. So then after certain period of time, after using this kind of English, it was mainly used in the advertisement purpose. So for example, in the 19th century witnessed an align tongue. English became the language of the Indian government. So when you talk about this Indian government, you have to understand, before there was no Indian government. I'll quote you there. There is no Indian government. There was British government, and there were Indian rulers. So the government in the word the government of India came into being when the writings uh, are started. Before, it was in a political domain. Then gradually it came into uh, newspapers, like advertisement. Newspapers, there were newspapers only in Calcutta and Bombay. And advertisements resemblance in bureaucratic notices. So when I say the bureaucratic and political, there is a slight difference in bureaucratic and mm, political. It sounds the same, but there is a difference between bureaucratic and political. I will tell you what is the difference. So first, you understand, first there was a phase that English was used only in a political domain, and how the English was. It was kind of exaggerated. It was a formal way. And the word it is called, what is the word that is giving there? It is called ostentatious formality. Okay. Then the later, gradually, as the days passing by, the English language from the political domain, it was introduced into the advertisements like newspapers. So newspapers like Calcutta and Bombay, in those newspapers, the English was introduced there. So when you write in a newspaper, again the English will be slightly different, comparing it to political field. And then the advertisements, and the people started writing. So advertisement mostly resemble which kind of writing? It is like bureaucratic notices. So here, when they started writing, they this government of India, a term called government of India, it was coming into being, it was started using. And if you ask me, officially there was a government of India? No, there was no government of India. But this word, this term has started into use. So political domain later on it got weakened. Why the political domain got weakened? The language is tied up in a content and a style with the history of English for the past 3 centuries and more. During the early days of the company, which company? East India Company, what was referred to as the transportation phase was mostly used in the political domain, and that was too ostentatious formality. The style was marked as a lordship register with its friendship and humbleness vocabulary. The vocabulary was a highly decorative kind of vocabulary. You can see that kind of vocabulary mostly in the Persian writings. So, a vague desire for some sort of political alliance with the British merchants and partial acceptance of British rule, which marked the ambivalent attitude of Indians towards the British, was reflected in the content and the style of their English. The British was perceived as a potential power by the Indian feudal feudal lords, and each one was willing to conspire against others to get more political powers. So, because our Indian rulers found that British is as a topmost country and the supremacy country, because they have all the powers. If you take it in a political or either in economic way, in all the ways, British, they our Indian feudal leaders, our Indian native leaders who were present that time, they thought that British was the powerful country. So they wanted to get under the wings of British government. So in our Indian rulers, they had a fightings like, I want to go and get an I should be taking first place under the British governments. So says the next king. So there was a slight fighting between our Indian feudal lords, because they wanted to get all the political powers from the British so that they can even more expand. Our Indian rulers also has some selfish thinking, so that they wanted to expand under the control of the British. So at the time, India was perceived as one unit, and there was no unifying for factors. That's what I told you. So there was no unifying factors. India can never be, that time it was not an unified complete Indian country. So it was under all, the parts were different. So under this political domain, whenever you have a writing, you call it as a petition register. So there the lordship register, and here the petition register was also emerging in certain written functions, such as the British bureaucracy. So the third domain was the use of English in the advertisements, as I discussed. Indian merchants, who were the traders of our Indian, used for advertising their own market, and used it in the newspapers, which were published in Calcutta and Bombay. The advertisement mostly resembled which writing? The bureaucratic writing. The company encouraged a small section of Indian entrepreneurs to undertake commercial virtues, catering to the needs of Company, which is East India Company, not only newspapers but also related systems of government control came into being. So because of these writings, so India has also having a paper, established a newspaper. So something you should write on about India when you wanted to write an article, when there is some writings about the Indian. So this term, which is the term government of India, came into control. I mean, it came into being. So after in uh, as the days passing by, when the political domain was in a boom, then later advertisements, and then again after some days, the political domain was weakened. And why it got weakened? Because the political domain weakened during the second phase of this history, and the communication between Indian rulers and the British also diminished. Why? The communication took place within the bureaucracy between Indian and British bureaucracy. So here, why the political domain got weakened? Because there was no communication in the political. Before, when I spoke to you, there was a much communication in the political domain. That's why it got scattered there. The English was scattered there, and the writing was morely into the formal writing. So when it comes to here in the second phase of the transportation phase, here the political domain weakens. When the political domain weakens, there was no writing, formal writing. So what was the writing? The writing was more into bureaucratic. So there was all the writings were mostly into Indian bureaucratic system, and between the communication between the Indian bureaucratic system and the British bureaucratic system. And now, what is the difference between political domain and bureaucratic? It sounds both the same, but what is the actual difference is a political domain encompasses to elected officials and political parties. Who are the elected officials and parties? It is only spoken in those fields. So this political domain functions only in politicians and political entities, like laws, policy agendas, high level decisions who are taken by highly officials who take the decisions of their country. So these people come under these terms come under the political domain. When you come to bureaucracy, the nature of bureaucracy is composed of non-elected government officials. They are elected government officials. Bureaucracy are the people who are non-elected government officials, but still work under the uh, politicians who work for the government but who are not elected. These comes under the bureaucratic people. So for example, if you take political domain, executive leaders, prime ministers, governors, legislative bodies, or political parties, any elected officials will come under the political domain. When it comes to bureaucracy, like public services, mostly like postal services, and if you in food area, also food and drugs, medicines areas, who are they are not elected by the people, but in political side they are elected by the people, and they are into highly designations. They have the high designations and they work for the country. But bureaucratic or the people, they also have their hand in the governance of the country, but they are into not non-elected government officials. So this is the difference between the uh, political domain and the bureaucracy. So there in the first phase, the much communication was in the political domain, and in the transportation phase, there was a much communication in the bureaucratic. And who are the both bureaucratics here? Indian bureaucratic and the British bureaucratic. So the communication was going on. Most of the communication was going on in these two people. That's why the political domain became weekend. So this style of communication does not show The influence of Persian writings. Are you getting me? So in the first phase, it is highly the writings are and the conventions are of Persian, but here the conventions and the writings are not of Persian. So the British bureaucracy actually took over the powers of native rulers, and consequently, the English language became the language of the British bureaucracy. So this was a reason the political domain has diminished. So that may be due to the fact that English education was available at least some Indians as a result of the changes in the policy of East India Company. More bureaucratic jobs were available. Because of this reason, the enormous increase in the jobs are available for the Indians. And Indians employed for these jobs were the recipients of the English education. So a few intellectuals, so here you have to understand this is all about the English language. So whoever was elected, whoever was talking, whoever was into jobs, into the bureaucratic jobs, everybody knows English here, because British and there are two parties here. One is Indian bureaucracy and British bureaucracy. So definitely the communication is in English. So, from the exaggerated English to kind of some informal English, we have changed. It has turned. The English language is slightly turned, slightly bent into a some other way of talking, way of writing. The speech and the writing became different. So here because there was more of bureaucracy, in British bureaucracy took over the powers of the native rulers. English language became the language of the British bureaucracy. So whoever I work the Indian is itself working in the in the Indian itself working the jobs of the British bureaucracy. But whatever the writing and whatever the talking he's doing in English. So you, if you take your textbook, there are a lot of writings of political domain and the bureaucratic domain. How did they write in the newspaper when it is a leave letter, or it is any other writing, creative writing? You, there are so many writings. There are writings from Raja Ramohan Rai and so many other people. You can go back and check into your textbook. So during the first phase, the early days of the East Indian Company, the English of Indians was confined basically to the political domain. In terms of style, mostly Persian convention in writing were used in the lordship register. Some form of writing marked by lack of clarity, ambivalence was also available in bureaucratic writing and advertisements of Indian merchants. So this is about the first phase. And during second phase, the transportation phase of the English of Indians diminished of the political domain. That has diminished. The bureaucratic domain has took over the power. So because of the bureaucratic power, British bureaucracy took over the powers, and that English language has become the language of the British bureaucracy also. So after this, the education will come into the picture. So during the third phase, the use of English in India took a different turn again. Even though internationally and nationally there were wars. Sorry. I'm sorry. So um, during this time, whatever the time I'm talking, in this period, there were wars going on, the which wars like First World War and the Second World War. It was going on. It the so much of turmoil after the so much of turmoil in the political areas, the use of English in Indian brought in a different kind of atmosphere in the minds of Indians. So there was wars going on, there was a business going on. First Indian rulers were ruling India, there was no English, and then some people come speaking in English. Now all the Indian rulers who we thought that time that they were the lords, they all these Indian rulers were again saluting other bigger person who is called the British person. And the language comes, that time they thought that there were the people who were we were under their control, so we have to listen them, and we have to do whatever they say. So they used it for the communication purpose, political purpose, and then the bureaucratic purpose. And then now, when the wars are going on, when the world wars are going on, this English has put a different mindset. The Indians have changed their minds when this has entered. They completely took a different turn, and their minds became different, and they are into a kind of a different atmosphere. British Empire was fully established during this period. It was not only on the territorial empire. In its language, English was well entrenched in the minds of men and women. By that time, the English language has so influenced by the people of Indian. So everybody has their own influence. They are liking, they are keeping it into minds, even though they don't like the British people. The English has the language of English has changed their minds more than the British Empire. The empire of the English language got well established in India. You have to understand this point. British Empire has established, and they went off, but English is still there. So why it is there? Because English has enrooted into the minds of the Indians, into the men and women and children of Indians. So English language was well established in India. The rulers might not have uh, you know mm, uh, oh, cannot take away from the language from India in any situation. So there was a lurking fear back in England. So England was feared that England has uh, before, England did not think that English is a global language. English has a much weight when compared to all other languages. So when this was going on in India, and the English was widely spreading, so there was a slight fear in England people, that they are thinking that the spread of education. So now, not only trading, now people are thinking to come up with universities, colleges, and teaching English into the Indian. So when this happened, when this will happen, English will spread all over the universe. So it will become more and more of English speaking people, and England people thought that this is not good for us. So English language among the subject Indians would make them challenge, and they will not stand in the line. They cannot. England people thinking that they cannot stand in the line there, because the British, the English speaking people will took over everything. So in England, many believed that the American colonies would not have been independent of the British crown had they not been led by the educated class. So, a guy called Edmund Burke once pointed out of high level of education among the Americans was the cause of their love of liberty and independence. So, Edmund Burke, a philosopher, a writer, an intellectual person, a known notable person, said that a highly educated person, any he is talking about American. If you take it in a broader way, if any person is who is highly educated, he knows the love of liberty and freedom. He won't stick to a narrow-minded thinking. His mind is elaborated, and he'll get wings, and he'll try to explore and see the things in a different way. So the what is giving you so much of perspective in seeing the world, because you are educated. And where is the education coming from? The education is only from the language called English. Because if you see, after this independence, and what whoever it is, like for example, if you take Mahatma Gandhi, Ambedkar, and all the other important people, they all did their education. The ones they thought, of course, the ironic here is they got their education in English language, and they for the further education, they went to abroad, like Oxford, Cambridge universities, and they studied there. They have got full knowledge of education, and they came back to our mother country. They know what is freedom, they know what is love, and they know even though Britishers gave us education by giving us English, they know that India is our country, and they thought that India is not unified. It was not a united country because it was under many other Indian rulers. So this language, English language, under the name called English language, these people, our Indian freedom fighters, came into one word, and struggled for the Indian, for our freedom. So this is a graph you need to understand. So Edmark was a guy who pointed that if you get a highly educated, he was talking in the context of Americans, but if you take it on a broader level, any education, if you study well, if you think, if you really understand what is the universe, what is the culture of, what is the world is of, and how many galaxies, how many our continents are there. So if you think of all these things, you'll be educated, and the mindset of yours will be changed, and you will never stick to and you will never waste your time into a normal stupid conversation. So that is what I'm trying to say here is, when you are educated, when you are highly educated, you will know the liberty and the freedom, the value of liberty and freedom. So Edmund mm, Burke was saying the same thing, and many thought that, not only Edmund Burke, many thought that they had just lost America because of their foolish things. They are thinking, not only England, all the other countries are thinking that Americans are doing a stupid thing by introducing education into their because why to share your education into some other country, when they will know, and they will learn the things, maybe they will take control over you. So why to share? So see, so many people thought that these Britishers, whatever they are thinking, all the other countries are thinking that why don't they just go do the business and come back? Why they wanted to introduce English to into other lands? So that's a foolish step they are taking. So this was a discussion going on in other countries also. So many thought that they had just lost America because their folly in allowing the establishment of schools and colleges, and that they should not repeat. So as they did in America, they should not repeat the same thing in India. If you do the same thing in India, it is again a foolish act. Folly is nothing but a foolish act. But after the discussions also, did that happen? No. We still had our universities and colleges in English medium. So a guy called Warren Hastings himself found a college in Calcutta. In which year? It is in 1780. It is not after independence. This is I'm talking a guy called Warren Hastings. He's a guy from before Independence Day. He established a college in Calcutta, and this university is had a teaching of Arabic and Persian. It was not about the English. So there are few. Even in the British side, even the European people side, there are few people who are encouraging the native languages also. So that was he was a guy who established a college in Calcutta in 1780, and the mode of education was the system of education was the Arabic and Persian. So when it was like this, we already there was another group of people we already heard about them was Christian missionaries. So even they have their hand in bringing English in India. And what was their agenda to really educate the people? They were dedicated people. Their aim was just to preach Christianity. So because the clear agenda of preaching Christianity, they wanted schools and colleges should be in English. So whatever they wanted to teach them, if the children in the colleges or university know English, they can their aim will be much easy. So their dedication was to bring Christianity into our land. So even they had contributed their hand into bringing English education. So even here we had a blessing even there, because there are so many pioneers who studied in the Indian no in the Christian missionary schools. Whatever people, so many people have studied in Christian missionary schools, but so many pioneers and vernacular education and even language pundits were rose out of these educations. So the missionaries were aiming to change them, but Indians were so much into learning, and they wanted to learn because it was very new to them. By that time they were only Indians were only into agriculture, trading spices, doing their own kind of things. But when this English, they were much fascinated and they were so admiring the language. So everybody was showing so much interest in learning the language. So the Krishna missionaries were aimed to change people into Christianity. But not only that, there were so many pioneers. Their language pundits were rose who were studying in their colleges and universities. So this is the again another topic for you to write in the phases, like phases, first phase, second phase, third phase. So when Charles Grant, when the time come for the Charles Grant, William Bentinck, and the Macaulay, these three, and also few added here, preferred English education. So these people preferred. There were some hidden agenda for in Macaulay's recommendations of English education into India, but they were really trying to bring English into the colleges and universities, and they were thought that let us teach them English. So why they wanted qualified clerks, who do the accounting things, who do the writing things for the highly people. So they wanted the clerks and the administrators for this Macaulay and Charles Grant, or whoever in that period. They wanted to bring English into our education system, because the qualified clerks and administrators to run the administration, they advocated a policy of working through the educated native elite. Macaulay's minute gave filtration theory, and it became the government's policy. And what is that policy? That resulted more and more of babus were produced. Now here there is a term called babus. Have you heard about this? Is an Indian word. uh, there is a term called babu, babu. We'll call it, we generally call a guy here nowadays, we'll call a guy or a person, or our children, our sons, will call them as babu. But in that, in those period, the clerk and the administrator, whoever doing the administrating things, those persons who called as babus. So when this was introduced into the education system, there was more and more babus. There was very limited babus before. When the education was came, and the Macaulay guy has introduced the education into the English into the education system, so it was favoring more of enlightening Indians. So it was favoring Indians. Why it was favoring? There were more jobs in the administration level. People are getting paid working in the working under the administrationship of British. So the clerks and the administrators were termed by a name called babus. So this phrase babus belongs to 20th century, though it was used in the early century too. Babus was mentally became part of the Indian urban culture, who saw the future. This future was seen by Macaulay guy, and it did really happen. But leaders like Mahatma Gandhi transformed or converted the Babus into full-fledged agitators, and the Bengali Babus were leading Indian freedom struggle. So Mahatma Gandhi, you take people like Mahatma Gandhi, Ambedkar, and many more people, if you name them, all were into whatever the religion was, whatever the culture was, whatever their mother tongue was. They came under, they could communicate, and their thoughts and ideologies matched. Which ideologies matched? Only political ideologies matched. Maybe all the people came from different places, different religion, different culture, but these our freedom, I'm talking about our freedom fighters, whoever the freedom fighter was, all the freedom fighters came under one tree called political freedom. What is that political freedom? Was they able to communicate. These people can communicate about and speak about our Indian and about our freedom in English, because they got educated by the time in the English uh, university. So English has have somehow helped. Britishers came, and we thought that they have ruled us, and they took so much things, and they did so many atrocities. But because of this English language, all the people came under the one roof called India. Then all from all other states and capitals, whatever present in India, whatever the places are there by that time. So even the Indian rulers were ruling. Indian rulers were also the subordinates of the British that time. So these freedom fighters came under one under the tree called English language. Because they learned the language, and they came onto one under the tree called one ideology, that is political ideology. So here the principles of freedom and liberty, they have learned the principles and freedom and liberty. They nurtured by the power of higher education. They have gained, they have found all the wisdom. They have grabbed all the wisdom what they have to get it from the education. In political consciences grew steadily. Say they have gone to the Western people. They have seen the political things there, how the things work, how people should not be slaves for the uh, higher, whoever the people, the kings or the whoever want to trade, explorers, traders, the people should not be slaves. So these people got nurtured by the power of higher education. Politically conscience grew steadily. English became the common language of the native intelligentsia. Our native intelligent people, for these people, English became the common people, those scattered over widely separated parts of the subcontinent to exchange ideas and with comparative ease. The growth of the educated class was also closely associated, so there was no class here. When it comes to political ideologies, there is no caste, there is no class, there is no black and white, there is no religion, there is no nothing, but they came onto one uniformity, but that is, we want Indian for Indians. That is not this India is not for British or any other. Our India is for our Indians. So we they fought their ideologies matches. So the growth of the educated class, also the upper class, the poor class, all came together. The growth of the educated class was also closely associated with the development of our Indian press as an offspring of English education. The native press developed into an educational and political agency. Thus, English education and Indian nationalism grew hand in hand. Now, you understand why the nationalism and English education grew hand in hand. English was also growing hand in hand, and the nationalism was also growing hand. Nationalism is nothing but India is our country. People are thinking this is all one country, and we are our all are our brothers and sisters. We should have an uniformity. So nationalism, the uniformity was growing hand in hand, and English education was also growing hand in hand. English education played an integrating function and a major role in the genesis of the nationalist movement. Schooled in the foreign culture, speaking a foreign tongue when occasion demand, indoctrinated with foreign political, social, and economic concepts, the native intelligentsia developed aspirations were different from those anticipated by the rulers. So, even they were working under the clerks as administrators to our administration, that is British administration. So whatever the work they are doing and whatever the education are they are getting by the Britishers, by the established universities, colleges which British has established them, all after getting all those things, after getting the native intelligence, and they have the creative thinking. They are thinking, oh, after getting all the education and thinking that even America works as a united country, and the British works as a British people as a united thing. China, Japan, why not India? India is why not a unified, complete Indian country? So now, after getting all this knowledge, principles, freedom, liberty, nurtured by the power of the higher education, political consciences, and all these things, speaking, even those studying in the foreign schools, foreign universities, and cultural speaking in a foreign tongue, when occasionally demanded, also doctrinated by the foreign political, social, and economic concepts, but still the native intelligentsia was also developed by their minds, whoever were so much interested in getting into the freedom struggle. Their aspirations were different from those anticipated by the rurals. The rurals were what whoever the rulers were thinking that they are ruling, but slowly, somehow these aspirations were coming in, were rooted in the minds of our freedom fighters. So instead of being the interpreters and ally of the administration as Grant and Macaulay expected, educated became very vigorous competitors of the bureaucracy, instead of serving British imperialism, they turned into its bitterest criticism and raised the cry of India for Indians. So they have known and they have changed their cry. They have vigorous competitions of the bureaucracy. So whatever the Michele foreseen, whatever the Michaelis thought the future was, so it was completely getting different. So Indians became vigorous competitors of the bureaucracy. Instead of they serving British imperialism, they turned into its bitterest critics and raised the cry of India for Indians. So all these factors, whatever we discussed, all these factors resulted in turning English into one more mediums of Indian sentiments. So English, which was a foreign language, which we taught in an earlier phase, became the second language during the third phase. English never entered into the intimate areas of the Indian psyche. And what does that mean? English never entered into the intimate areas of our Indian psyche. That means it has never entered into our home. It was only outside of our home, whether it was for a political purpose or an economic purpose, it was a job purpose, or whatever it was only for a like using and throwing it, use and throw kind of thing. It was never a our home language. It nobody spoke. This was a time of in the 20th century, not now. Everything has changed now. Everybody is speaking in English, even in the home now. The scenario is completely different from now. But in in that time, in our history, it was written that English was never a home language. It was it was never the intimate language. It was only outside of the home. It reminded a language outside the home, but a very smart street language. So the print media, the political activities increased the number of English educated Indians. So the large number of urban population, including people in the semi-urban, both some of the semi-urban people and the large number of urban population, both are highly educated in English language. From the language of bureaucracy, it became the language of media. From the political domain, it entered into bureaucracy, and from the bureaucracy, it became into media and creative writing. Given below us, you have so many specimens for examples. There are so many writings for in the political domain, in the bureaucracy time, or in the media, or in the creative writing. There are so many different writings. You can go see them, because we don't have time to discuss all of them. What are the political writing, what are the domain writing, everything. So we have understood here the register and the petition register. Second phase is into the petition register, and the first phase into the lordship register, which is much influenced by the Persian Convention writings. And here it is not the Persian Convention writings, it is all about the bureaucracy. And from the bureaucracy, in the third phase, you have entered into the media writing. So by the time we entered into the media writing, like newspapers, articles, and creative writing. So English has gradually changed its tone, accent, and from the formal ostentatious formality to calm general use of language. It was getting by as a gradually the changes are going on, the way of English speaking and writing was also a different. So it was resulted into a distinct variety of English. From all this exploring things and factors, whatever happened, the way of English has distinctly it is varied from before English and now English. So what are the varieties that caused big the variation, whatever the variation from British English to our Indian English, because there were so many Indian English speakers. So the variation is so much different. And why? Because the growth of the English education on the mass scale, that was before, that was the urban scale. Now, because of so many universities and so many colleges have rose up, secondary education, higher education, all we discussed, the committee sessions, those are the times where the all the education system has established, because the mass is also the a guy called Obert Wood was only concentrating on the technical education system. So some other guy was concentrating on free education. So everybody, whoever we are speaking in our textbook, so everybody has the come up with the own ideologies which are help so much of helpful into our education system. So the growth of English education into the mass scale in the rural areas has changed the variety. That has caused that is one of the reason. And the growth of Indian intelligentsia. When I'm talking about Indian intelligentsia, it is nothing but our Indian people who are highly educated, and they are thinking, and they thought that the freedom, love, liberty is must. So they are seeing the world in a different perspective. So the I'll stop you there, please. Sorry. Sorry, I interrupted the class. So, are you with me, class?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes,
Yeah.
ma'am.
So,
Ma'am.
I was talking about the distinct variety of English. So, why the distinct variety of English? Because of the so many education systems, the growth of education systems, and also in the mass scale, in the rural time. And the second one was the freedom movement. Slowly the Indian minds were changing, and they were thinking of the freedom. So the because of the freedom movement, and because of the Indian intelligence, yeah. So whatever the intelligence of our Indian people are owning, and they're coming up with the new ideologies and new thinking. So because of that, and the growth of print media, particularly in the urban areas, and also the creative writing, the growth of creative writing in English, that try to bend English in the Indian way. So, there was a term called English we discussed in the Englishes. What are the new Englishes formed? When we discussed in this topic in globalization era. So, what our English, whatever the Indian English has formed, our Indian English is different from American, British, whoever it is. So we have our own sort of kind of speaking English. Our accent is different, but we did not. So we did not starting from the zero level itself. We did not speak very good English. We had Butler English speaking people. We have other people also. I'll get to that point later. So we have many Englishes, many kind of speaking Englishes, and all together we formed Indian English. So these all points have contributed us mm, to write or to think into bend from British and American English into our Indian English way. So these points, what all the points, I'll repeat them again. The first one is education system, which is which was going. enormously rapidly, and the education into the mass. So there is generally there is a difference between people speaking in higher level and people speaking in mass areas. So you can find the difference. The higher level people, like high class people speaking English, is different when you are comparing it to a low class, like for a mass or rural areas. So there was enormous increase in the mass speaking English also, because there was free education. Gradually, after the education systems, the committees were gone, there was also a free education. When there was a free education, there were so many masses learning in English. So the mass learning English also created a difference in added the point into one variety of English. The freedom movement helped us. And the second one, the Indian intelligence, yeah, whoever the Indian intelligence, yeah, these Mahatma Gandhi, Raja Mohan Rai, Ambedkar, all these people will come under Indian intelligence. Yeah. So because they had put so much of struggle after learning, after getting educated. So the growth, and these people itself thought that English, because of this English, India has become unified. No matter is he's a Punjabi or a Muslim or a Christian or whatever it is, English language has made unified. And because of this English language, we are able to communicate. Because people in south side spoke Dravid languages, some spoke Persian languages, and some people were speaking Urdu. So when even in India, their communication barrier was there. But after the education systems, after the colleges, universities, after masses also learning English, all our Indian people also were communicating in English. And after our Indian intelligentsia, they were thinking of the people who were thinking in a different perspective. When they know what is freedom, they know that British should not rule our India. That they were these all people has contributed so much for the freedom fight. So these were the varieties of English. These were the people who contributed for the varieties of English. So there is a topic, another topic for you called World Wars. So that's an actually that's an interesting topic here. So whatever the points are there, I just spoke. I did not put the slide up, so now you can see there. So the 4 points: the growth of English education on a mass scale, growth of Indian intelligentsia, and the freedom. There is a spelling mistake there, so don't get confused. And the freedom movement, growth of print media in the urban areas, growth of creative writing in English that tried to bend English in Indian way. Yasmin, you're trying to say something? Please go ahead.
No, ma'am.
There is
Nothing.
a message. Interpreters.
Yeah.
Okay. So, uh, why are we discussing about world wars here? It's because there is a contribution of the world wars also. Definitely, there will be. It's not just a simple war. We had a big wars. One is World War One and World War Two. So, I just wanted to brush up. We already know, everybody knows, even a child know. One was the First World War, and another child, Second World War. So it was around 1914 to 1918, and Second World War was 1939 to 1949. So what happened here? So the English-speaking soldiers were all over the world. You know that even it was not our World War, our war, that means Indian war, it was of a world war. So our Indian soldiers also participated in the World War One and in the World War Two. So when they went to participate, so they got interacted there, and they communicated. Communication has happened, and that was also a different cause, and different variety of English. Not only the ones which we spoke earlier. Here there was another two varieties here: cantonments English and butler English. Cantonments English, when the soldiers will go and put tents and stay in a place for certain period of time during the war. So the language they speak to their subordinates, the soldiers, then the communication will happen in their subordinates, is called the cantonment language. That is yes sir, no sir, the soldier, the way they speak. Copy sir, copy sir. So these the orders when they pass, whatever the language was, and definitely it was in English. There was not only soldiers from India, there were soldiers from all over the place. So anyone into the soldier community, they have to speak English. So there are two languages spoken there, our Indians especially, but that was contemporary language and butler English. So butler English, that that is not the exact English. The most Indian speaks butler English. We know that. So contemporary English, those are the two varieties again, which these varieties made our Indian English look like a different English. So, how many, just for an IQ purpose, there were like 1.3 million Indian soldiers who served for in World War One. And in World War Two, there were like 2.5 million Indian soldiers who served for World War Two. So you can imagine how vast the language has. Language will definitely grow and come up with the new fusion and hybrid fusion. So when the soldiers go there and stay there and they speak there for years, then definitely the language will be different, right? So the language will change. So when the language will be when the languages are spoken with all other peoples, the new variety language, the hybrid language will come up. The contribution of these Indian soldiers in both the world wars were immense, and we are very thankful to them for their bravery, for their dedication, and but there were so many soldiers also who died. So we'll definitely remember them. We remember we in this class we are remembering and we'll honor them. There's so many our Indian soldiers, like so millions of Indian soldiers were died in this both the world wars. So world wars also has their contribution in English, the new varieties of English in India. So English was born, American English was heard in different parts of the world and it complicated. And the British variety for recognition. In India, for example, a number of varieties like cantonment English and butler English were heard. And cantonment and butler English were muchly occupied by the soldier areas. Along with the, one second, close the door. Along with these developments, Indians' freedom struggle gave another important to the growth of the English in India. Nationalism. That is the important point. Nationalism also helped in the, which is called nationalism is nothing but India's freedom struggle. So leaders from different linguistic regions and English education leaders came together in the one name called the national cause called the English became the common link language. Here you can speak about the lingua franca. So why is the term lingua franca has come to the practice? It was a link language. So lingua franca is nothing but the link language. So leaders and the different linguistic regions and English educated leaders came together for the national cause, and English became the common link language. I have discussed this already with you people. There's a name called lingua franca, right? So there is a guy here. all these contributions, okay, all these contributions to the expansion of English, whatever we are discussing here, again, it is a circle, kind of a circle of life. Whatever the changes, whatever the political changes, national changes, and world war changes, whatever the changes, the missionary changes, in the market level, whatever the changes are, these all contributing for the English language, English education, and the use of English in India. At the same time, the nationalistic stream also contributed a lot to the growth of the education in India. For instance, for example, if you take Gopal Krishna Gokhale, was a professor. He is a professor, we all know that. And the principal, he was a principal in which year in 1905, and for the university called Pune Ferguson College. And the college called Pune Ferguson College, and he's a professor there. And he also worked as a principal in the same college, and also he was a president of a National Congress. So this he was a person. He made the great effort. He was a person to bring a point called, he made a heroic effort to make the government accept, the British government to accept the principle of compulsory education. So nobody, no matter whoever it is, no age barrier, no caste barrier, no anything. So everyone should be educated. Gopal Krishna Gokhale came up with the idea for education to everybody. So he put the effort, he made the heroic effort for the government to accept which principle, the principle for compulsory education. So he came up with the idea, and he also introduced a bill to the Imperial Legislative Council, but nevertheless they did not accept it. Later they did, but when the Gopal Krishna Gokhale has passed the bill, so they did not accept it. But it was his idea. You remember that whose idea was that to compulsory education was it was Gopal Krishna Gokhale. So this bill was, he came up with the idea of the bill, but it was not taken into consideration that time, was defeated by the government resolution on the education policy emphasized compulsory primary education. So the Calcutta University Commission was appointed, and it recommended the separation of intermediate classes from the university. So the whatever the intermediate +1 and +2, the classes has been separated. So the Calcutta University Commission was appointed to separate these universities, so classes from these universities. It also recommended the use of the mother tongue, the native language, as a medium of instruction in the intermediate colleges. So that's why we always have the language to select in our intermediates. So the national education movement was started under the leadership of, we all know, that is our Mahatma Gandhi, and a number of Vidya and the universities were started outside the government control. In 1928, the Hartog Committee was appointed to review the progress of education in India, and it is recommended consolidation and the variety improvement. So, when we are talking about, maybe if you get a question about Abbott Wood report, if you get a small question, I mean, in the second bit, if you get the Abbott, he is a guy who he worked in the Central Advisory Board of Education and was reviewed in 1935. Two experts, Mr. Abboud and Mr. Wood, both are the experts, were invited to advise the government on matters of educational reorganization, and particularly on the problems of the vocational education. So these two people worked for the vocational education. That the report was about the technical education. So when you say vocational, it is all about the technical. So when you write about Abboud and Wood, It is about the uh, technical education. So when you are talking about, there is also two topics called Indian economy nationalism, and there you can talk about also, because technical is a term who he wants to, technical education he wants to introduce. That means technical education was in no way inferior to general education. He thought that technical education is no way inferior to general education. So Indian economic nationalism is a result. There is a topic called Indian economic nationalism. So Indian economic nationalism is a result of realization. What is a realization here? After doing the political slavery, economic slavery, and industrial slavery to the bigger empires like British empires. So we got the realization India has its own economy. So we had our own things. We have our own spice trades. So we are not such a poor country. So we have realization. Then after, when the Britishers are ruling and did whatever, there is a term called Indian economy nationalism. So nationalism, what is nationalism here? Ekta, I mean unity. The before you there is a picture for you to understand. Before, there was no unity. I mean, there is no saying called India is one country there, because there were many Indian rulers ruling. And this, when the British has stepped into our picture, these Indian rulers were again under the British only, because British has ultimate powers. All the powers, if you take it in a military way, or in a money way, or in any other way, business, trade, anything you see, it has taken over all the controls, because it is a powerful country. So obviously our Indian rulers are under the British. All the For example, European countries, whatever the European countries came to trade us, we are under them. So we are under them. We worked for them. We were slaves for them. They looted us. They did trade for so many. We have lost so many heritage of our properties. We know that we lost our diamonds. We lost our stones, precious stones. So everything was going on. Then people got educated. Then English came into education. Education was compulsory. They learned education. For the broader education, they went to Oxford, Cambridge. They learned education. They came to know what is liberty. They know what is freedom. They came back, and they are gathering all other people who wanted freedom. Though when you want to communicate there in India, they were all languages speaking people. So again, because of English, everybody were able to discuss about the nationalism, about the freedom fight. So English has brought everybody under one roof. They discussed, they spoke about the freedom. They implemented, they played strategies, they done everything, and they made an India free. No We were slaves before, and they made us free from for free Indians. So then after that, by the time after the studies were introduced, there was a term called Indians economy nationalism. So they are realizing that our economy is also looted. So now let us control, and again start to build up our Indian economy. Indian economy nationalism is a result of the realization that India was not really prosperous under the British rule, owing to the ruin of her manufacturers and the passing of economic and financial control into the hands of British capitalists. So we gave everything into the under the hands of British, and they did the capitalism. In addition to the political slavery, you name it, political slavery or economic slavery or industrial slavery, whatever was that. So was a theme of the nationalists. So these three things they were fighting for it. So for political slavery and economic slavery and industrial slavery. So the drain of Indian wealth into England without any measures to counteract that loss was the real cause of the India's poverty. The country was dependent on foreign imports for every article of luxury and comfort. Even the industries and manufacturers for which raw materials existed were monopolized by British capitalists. The case of cotton production in India which was adding to English wealth without improving the condition of the people, is just an example that we already know. The measure of our country's wealth, argued the nationalists, lay in its capacity to produce the necessities of the life, to export articles of commerce. The nationalists held that India had once been economically a very prosperous country and progressed great stores of wealth. We have, we have, we don't have anything lacking. We are greatly doing in all the varieties like agriculture. We were a prosperous country. We had wealth, we had agriculture, we had food, we had precious stones also. The Indians were a maritime and commercial nation. They had plowed the seas that extended from Egypt to China. This is before British. So India and Egypt were doing the trade through the sea, and from the Mozambique of the Indian Ocean. They were the first to develop the great spice trade. So Egypt to China and also India. There were the first trade of our spice trade, and they had carried the valuable cargoes which the Egyptians employed in preserving their mummies and the Romans in burning their dead. They had trade links with Barmese and Malays. These two places also, they had history of trading with these two people and had founded colonies in Java. India had been a great manufacturing nation before also. History demonstrated, in addition to being an agricultural country, Indians were at one time manufacturers because they moved and worked and manufactured for others. The nationalists who the thing what we are speaking, the in India's economic nationalism, these nationalists reached the conclusion that India's decline of economy life was due to foreign occupation. So we were doing very well, we were doing very good before. That was their nationalists trying to say, because there was a national freedom struggle. When there is a freedom struggle, they have to cover all the areas. So when they are talking about the economy of an India, so then the nationalists are speaking all these points. So the nationalists are saying that India's decline of our economic life was only due to of the foreign occupations, whatever the foreign has occupied, due to them. The Britishers were doing nothing to improve our economic condition of the people. England followed a deliberate policy of suppressing Indian industry. So the nationalists argued that the true wealth of India consisted of its arts, industries, and agriculture. They advocated the growth of technical education and debunked the clerk producing liberal education. So that is why they are promoting a technical education. Now you understood, India has very well economy, so English has bring the education, but nevertheless, why don't we go into our roots called technical education, and that's why they debunked the clerk of producing liberal education, whatever the liberal education was there. So this that's why I came up with this topic called Indian economic nationalism, because Abbott and Wood report says that they were the two people in their report. It is saying that technical education was no way inferior to general education because that is helping in our economy. Then there is again other topic called Indians political nationalism. So India's political nationalism, that's an important point. We have to remember whether we are getting it as a question or not. But India was never a united country. It came under, it said, it is saying as it has said to be an Indian only when the political ideologies of our national fighters, in Indian fighters, came up with this term called political ideologies. When the ideologies matched, then there was a brotherhood, national brotherhood. So India's political nationalism proceeded upon the assumption that the races and the people of India could unite upon the basis of common devotion. What is it, common devotion? That is political ideologies. Since the great common point for unification could not be language, since there was no common religion or social organization in a land of great diversity in social customs, the only unifying factor could be political ideology. This is an important point. You have to uh, underline it, remember it. If you get an answer, please write it. Because there was political ideology was the only unifying factor there to unify all our Indian people. So Gandhiji's ideology of the empire as a satanic creation was the starting point there. It has started there. Nationalism and political ideologies, everything is a root cause for the Gandhiji's creating his empire of freedom fighting. It was felt that the solution was not in armed rebellion, so he was not into violence. That's why he said that there is never a solution in fighting or in an armed rebellion, but in constitutional agitation for the rights of Indians. So these are our rights, let us fight for our rights, but not in a rebellion way. Indian nationalists felt that Indian unity was not an impossible dream and proposed the concept of a national brotherhood. So, these in this vast India, there were only like, if, for example, if there were only like 10 people coming with the ideology of freedom fighting and making our India a liberty country and sending off Britishers from here, when there were only 10 people, if you are thinking like that, what about the other? So they were all afraid, they were all scared, were thinking that it is an impossible uh, situation to do it. So Gandhi and followers of the Gandhi, Indian nationalists felt that Indian unity was not a impossible, was not an impossible dream. It is possible on the concept of what? On the concept of brotherhood. So no matter the caste, religion, person, and place, if all the Indians come together and in a concept called brotherhood, we can do this. So that was one is political ideologies and the one is national brotherhood. Indians formed several associations throughout the country like this to bring about India's unification. First, before fighting for India's freedom, they have struggled so much and came up with such kind of associations like coming for the unifying factor called political ideologies and a concept called a national brotherhood and another concept called favorable circumstances. So these all the associations, these are all the terms they are coming up with the India's unification. They also argued that India should take advantage of the favorable circumstances that the British rule had brought about to unity the Indian people, the impact of European education, and the common language of English. So these are the favorable. What are the favorable? One is political ideologies is a unifying factor to bring together. And there is, if there is an, they are thinking if it is an impossible dream, they are coming with another association called the neighborhood. National brotherhood, sorry, the national brotherhood. If you are thinking, let us be brothers in this struggle, so if you come up with that, so they are trying any other way, every other way for making India together, making India's unification. So there are also some favorable factors. What are the favorable factors? What all favoring us? It is from again the British rule. What is British rule favoring us? One is the European education, and because of that European education, the common language is English. Because of the English and because of that European education, these are the favorable facts which are helping us to again India's unification. In any way, the hand of the foreigner prepared the country for national unity and the reception of the national dogma. The English education class were in the forefront of the nationalist movement. All the Indian educational educated class were in the first line of the nationalistic movement, and every other person is behind them. A mutual dislike of the British bureaucracy brought about the much desired unity among them. Among educated Indians, as it is very evident, the notion of an Indian nationality covering the entire country crystallized and assumed the expression in the progress movement. A common language for the common cause was given partly by English education and partly by reaction to it. So, what is the time now? Okay, I think it's time up. It's already 3. Okay, I'll wind up the class here. So I've almost covered all the important topics. So please go through all the topics, read your textbook, and I've told you the important and first point is like don't read all the topics. Go to your questions, read the question and read the answer. Read the question and read the answer because you're going to get all the questions only from your textbook. No other from no other source no questions will come, so you have to read your textbook. So read your text questions and then answer. That will be very useful for you for your exams. Because I'm in some other state, I cannot mm, pull this class more further. I'll wind up here, and nice meeting you all, guys. Please write your exams, or all the best. Write your exams well, and all the best. If possible, we'll meet soon again. Take care and bye.
Bye, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you, madam. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye. Take care.